Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Thomas Trombley. I'm with the Windows Servicing and Delivery team here at Microsoft. Joining me on camera today are two of my esteemed colleagues, Mr. Jay Simmons and Ms. Laura Aritza. Joining the tech community chat are experts Sandeep Deo and our friend Cliff Fisher. For Jay and Laura, I'm wondering if you could just take a minute and introduce yourselves, and how long you've been part of Microsoft, and of course our esteemed team here at Windows Servicing and Delivery, otherwise known as WSD. Jay, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Jay Simmons. I am a software engineer here in the Active Directory team within the Windows Servicing Delivery org. I've been working on Active Directory for a long time. I've been at Microsoft a little over 27 years. Still having lots of fun. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Jay. And Laura, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Aritza. I'm a product manager on the Intune team, and I work primarily in the policy and security management space. I've been with Microsoft for about 4 years now, so it's been really awesome.
Right on. Well, thank you both for joining me this morning, this afternoon, this evening. Again, depending on where folks are sitting. We're parked in the morning. Back on April 11th, we announced that the much sought after Windows Lapse was now, well, or then as it were, was available as part of the April 11th security update. I know this, as our team worked on it with you, Jay, and crew, it was one of the most read blogs we've ever posted. I did peek this morning and it was sitting at around north of 269,000 views. Jay, I think we now retain a PR team dedicated to Lapse in your honor. But before we start diving into some of the questions, I was wondering if you might share a little bit more on how you first got involved in Lapse, both of you actually, and how you and crew have become the de facto experts on the subject.
Well, you know, within Microsoft, the team that I work on took ownership of the so-called legacy Lapse, which is still available on the Microsoft Download Center. That was about 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
And even then, we were talking about major upgrades to that product, and making it support Azure. Other priorities happened, and it took a little longer than we wanted to get here. But I've essentially been nearly full-time on Windows Labs over the last 16 months, finally resulting in shipping it on April 11th. So that's kind of how I got here.
Now, I know even as you and I and the team work remote, many of us are going into the office sometimes on Saturday, and you and I have caught each other in there on Saturdays working on those sorts of things. So good to hear. Laura, tell us a little bit about your involvement in Lapse since you started.
Yeah, for sure. I got introduced to this scenario from a couple of other people on the Intune and Azure Active Directory side. And I know this has been a top cloud adoption blocker for many enterprises. So the justification was there. And after having a couple of initial customer conversations, the takeaway was always, we need Lapse yesterday.
Right.
So it's no surprise that this is a heavily sought after feature, and with the partnership across the different teams within Microsoft and just the willingness to go ahead and build it, we've made some really amazing progress. So much time and thought put into how it's built out, and just the overall feature stack. So super happy to see it go out. The adoption has been incredible. I was at a conference recently in the past couple of weeks, and so much conversation on Lapse that it wasn't even a topic to discuss, but somehow ended up spending 20 minutes with the crew to walk through it. So excited to continue that conversation here, and see the adoption continue to rise.
That's great. You did mention it as a cloud adoption blocker, and I think that's reflected in seeing what happened back in April. The blog noted that the feature was ready to roll out of the box as part of that April security update, as well as Lapse support for AAD in private preview. I think you mentioned new features and capabilities for on-prem AD scenarios, as well as how to use it, which included a really cool video, by the way. I hope people check that out. What have you both learned since we published that post? I know it surfaced a legacy interoperability bug. out of the chute. And since then, you've published the Labs feedback board. No doubt we'll share that in the tech community chat. But what have you learned from collaborating with customers, which I know is of acute interest to you, Jay? We talked before this session about speaking offline with one of the members of the community, but I would like to know what you both have learned since you launched it back in April.
For myself, I would say that, as much as we've thought about the scenario and as much thought and effort we put into the design aspects and the different features and the policy knobs, it was still really hard to predict all possible customer environments and how the new feature might react. And I do kind of wish we had, maybe pushed it and promoted it even more than what we did. I mean, it was publicly available as of June 22, but even then, a lot of customers just weren't aware. So I wish we had gotten it out there and said, "Hey, this thing is in preview." Even in the insider builds, let us know, because we probably could have avoided some pain if we had done that.
Right. Laura, what about you? Since April, have you learned anything from customers? I know this group actively engages with the community, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, and of course, dive into their questions. But I'm wondering what you've learned thus far.
Yeah, I think leading on a little bit from what Jade mentioned, a lot of the permutations of edge cases and scenarios that specific customer environments bring light to that we don't necessarily think through when we're designing the feature and doing even the exhaustive amount of testing that we do leading up to a preview. So I think it's just always a good learning opportunity to remember all of the, again, like permutations of environments. Getting customer usage is helpful not only for us to uncover any bugs or issues and just get general feedback, but to recall some of the other areas that might not be super top of mind when we're designing the feature. So that's always a good reminder.
Well, for those of you unaware of Microsoft culture, the growth mindset is so huge. So hearing this from both of you is like growth mindset manifested. Want an example? Here you go. So really great to hear. I thought we'd go ahead and start diving into some of the questions. I took a kind of a pre-look at some of the items there in tech community, and we'll start at the bottom with Josh Montoya's question. Hopefully he's in attendance here. If not, we'll certainly get to him answering his questions in written form. But this one kind of alludes to roadmap, and I know we don't typically go down the roadmap path, but I do know that you both have been pretty transparent thus far in the communications that we've had, especially talking about previews. But when will Windows Labs support deployment to Server 2012 R2 or Server 2016?
2012 R2. Sorry.
Go ahead.
For Server 2012 R2, the basic answer is never. That platform is already in extended support, and we're never going to be backporting a brand new feature like this to Server 2012 R2. For Server 2016, the basic answer is also no. I know that many customers are still running that server operating system version, but we're trying to move forward. We had to draw the line somewhere. That's where we drew it.
Right on. Now, another question, I probably should have preceded that question, is why should I upgrade from Legacy Labs to Windows Labs?
Oh, this is a no-brainer. I mean, there are so many reasons, and basically it comes down to security and easier deployability. So yes, it's in the operating system now. So it's like no more MSI. I don't know if everybody realizes, but if we had found a bug in the Legacy Labs code, we would have had to basically publish the new MSI package on the download center and then promote and communicate that you customers, please go install this. And that's a really bad situation to be in if there's a security scenario or a security vulnerability that's out there. So just getting able to get security updates via the normal operating system updating channels is a huge win. And then the second part of my answer revolves around password-based security. So first of all, if you're going to be storing passwords in Azure, that's far better than just about anything else you can do with all of the default data protection layers that exist in Azure. So that's a huge win right by itself. But if you are still working with on-premise stored passwords in AD, the new password encryption feature solves so many issues. And as somebody who's worked a lot of security cases behind the scenes. I just feel like, again, it's kind of a no-brainer for why you would want to upgrade.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll also add to that, just based on the management experience coming from the Intune side of things, being able to deploy and manage your policies through Intune as you would with a bunch of the other types of settings in your environment is super helpful to have that in a template view, having quick links and documentation leading to the LAPS configuration service provider, so you can understand the settings that are available with additional capabilities that are not available through the legacy LAPS solution today. So we have everything that is available with legacy LAPS and then some, as well as the ability to take advantage of additional management experiences, such as viewing the password for a given device object with the right permissions, as well as being able to do an ad hoc manual rotation for a given device. So outside of just the foundational security measures that Jay had mentioned, just those extra capabilities that allow you to be agile and take full coverage of the scenario is really awesome. So with the base capabilities, that's all there. And then now we have that platform to go and expand into other cool feature experiences for labs. So it sets us up really, really well.
Well, I know that you and team worked on a pretty robust Get Started guide, which is on our Learn page. And I'll implore our friends Sandeep and Cliff to drop it into chat, because it includes a lot of what you spoke about for folks to kind of get acquainted with. Our next question comes from Miguel. We're about to enable LAPS in AAD. Since we have the majority of our hybrid desktops still on legacy LAPS, could we potentially enable LAPS and only deploy the device configuration policy to a subset and run both new and legacy side by side for a while as we stage migrating or existing legacy LAPS devices over? Wow, that's a detailed question. Which one of you thinks you could tackle that?
I'll take that one. Hi, Miguel. Bottom line, the answer to your question is a resounding yes. All of that is capable. We've designed the policy. The design of the policy knobs is meant to be very flexible in terms of either replacement of legacy LAPS or coexistence with legacy LAPS. I know we didn't have it on initial release, but there is now a migration guide available on our Learn site that you can look at that will go through all of the details. But the key underlying technical point that makes it possible to run side by side is, as long as the two policies once the two policies have landed on the same device, as long as they target a different local account, you will have no problems. And in fact, you could even have Windows LAPS backing up the password for a local account to Azure, while at the same time, of course, on-premise legacy LAPS could be backing it up to on-premise AD. It will work just fine.
Awesome. All right, let's jump to our next question from Robert. For reading the LAPS stored passwords from Intune, will there be an Intune role-based access control that can be assigned to administrators in scope tag groups to support a distributed IT model in a tenant, allowing regional admins to retrieve the passwords just for the devices in their scope? I understand Azure AD administrative units would be one way to handle this, but it would be great if Intune scope tags could offer similar functionality. And I think, Laura, I may pick on you to answer this question, given your background in Intune. So you think that one's something you could tackle?
Yeah, for sure. So for role-based access control, there's a couple of different knobs that we surface related to LAPS. So for policy configuration, that's one aspect that you can use the built-in roles or create your own custom roles to control for different admins. Related to being able to do manual rotation for a given device, that's another capability that is governed by a specific permission within Intune. So you have the ability to create custom roles based on that as well. But I think related to the specific part of the question for reading the LAPS password itself for a given device object, There's actually two parts to this that is controlled by permissions. One is being able to see the rotation schedule for a given device for that password. So knowing when the next password rotation is scheduled for and when the last one was, that is governed by a couple of permissions. And then the extension of that to actually view and retrieve the password is another part that's separated out. And that blade that you can actually do to retrieve the password is surfaced both in the Intune portal as well as the Azure portal. So it's actually the same page that we are showing depending on how you're navigating to it. And both of those pages, which is the same page, is governed by those different permissions that I had mentioned. So if you're looking to configure a set of roles for a specific admin, you can leverage those capabilities to break them out. In terms of scope tags specifically, I don't know if there's a specific one-to-one correlation there, but again, the specific permissions that we surface can be leveraged to target to specific admins to be able to grab whatever level of data you're looking for on the device. So hopefully that addresses the question. Feel free to put a bit more follow-up if there's more to it that I didn't address.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Our next question comes from Steve. We have legacy labs installed. Currently, are our workstations with the legacy version installed compromised now that the new version has been pushed out via Windows Update?
I'm not sure what Steve means by the definition of compromised. There's no security vulnerability in either legacy labs or in the new Windows labs. Simply by installing the updates, you're not making yourself unsecure. Steve might be referring to the legacy labs interop issue that we had that is now fixed as of the May Patch Tuesday update and beyond.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Our next question comes from Christian. I'd like to keep LAPS 6, which is installed as a separate MSI installed application, working as is after installing the April 2023 or May 2023 security updates on a Windows system, albeit server or client, that already has LAPS 6 installed on it. Is disabling the legacy Microsoft LAPS emulation mode the right way for this scenario, or is there another better way to handle it?
So, good question, Christian. So we had the bug, as I mentioned, in the initial April 11th update. As of the May 9th update, you really don't have to do anything. So if you install the Windows LAPS updates, you have not yet installed or applied a new Windows LAPS policy, but you still have the legacy LAPS MSI with the legacy LAPS policy installed, we will be hands off and we will let legacy LAPS continue to do its thing. So when you want to replace legacy LAPS with Windows LAPS, or if you want to do side by side, that's when you get into more of the migration scenarios. But once we're past the interop bug, which is true as of the May 9th update and beyond, no action should be required. And I'll caveat that with one minor exception, which is if you were talking about new operating system deployments using Microsoft Deployment Toolkit or similar, just be aware, and I have this written down in the docs in some level of detail, that the Windows LAPS emulation mode is on by default. So on an existing system, there should be no impact. If you're rolling out new operating systems and you're applying the policy before you if you're applying the legacy LAPS policy before you apply the legacy LAPS MSI, you might want to look into disable legacy LAPS emulation mode. That is in our docs. Shoot me an email offline if you'd like to follow up with that any further.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Our next question comes from Samuel, who wishes a warm hello and then says, if a post-authentication action to change a password failed because there was a lack of connection, for example, it seems it will not be retried. Is this normal? If not, will it be fixed?
That is not normal. That would be a pretty bad miss if we didn't think of that scenario during design. Essentially, if you have if you have the post authentication action policy enabled and an authentication occurs, we will persist that knowledge on the device while we're waiting for the grace period to expire. And we will keep retrying almost indefinitely, but it certainly won't give up right away. And so this will persist, and we will keep retrying. Even if you turn the machine off and stick it in a closet and take it out 6 months later, we'll keep trying. If you reboot it 100 times after authentication happens, we will keep trying. Bottom line, it's hard for I can't explain this the symptom you're sort of alluding to. If you can repro that bug, let me know. But I've got a lot of customers at this point who have let me know offline that it's definitely working for them.
Awesome. Just a reminder to everybody who's in attendance that we encourage you to post your questions up to aka.ms/ama/Windows Labs. So fairly straightforward. Let me see what we have for our next question. That comes from Joelle. We are just starting the Labs rollout in our environment. One question about the use of the built-in administrator account. Should we create a new admin account or just enable the built-in administrator account? What would you recommend? I'll defer that over to Laura if she can answer that question. Otherwise, I'll put Jay on the spot.
I might let Jay talk to this one since I think it's a little bit closer to him.
To his realm of expertise, Jay?
No worries, no worries. I should know the official answer off the top of my head. This answer is probably somewhere in the official Microsoft security baseline guidance. But what my opinion, I would probably go with leaving the built-in administrator account disabled and create a new account. It doesn't buy you much extra security, but it's just like a little bit of another layer of defense. We've been thinking a lot about this. I don't want to go against our official security guidance, but it's something that we might be improving and making a little bit easier in the future, in a future version of Labs.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Our next question comes from Keith. Let's see here. We are currently testing WinLabs and Intune, pushed out successfully to some test devices, can view admin, password, and rotate, etc. Looks good. However, by default, the built-in administrator account is disabled in our organization as is usual. All our devices are in autopilot, MDM Intune managed, HAAD joined. We expected or hoped that Intune endpoint security account protection policy would enable the built-in admin account if a specified account was not given. Has anyone else seen this? And if so, did you create a new local admin account or start enabling the built-in account? Cheers, and thanks for any help, advice, and expertise.
For that one, I don't know off the top of my head. It might be helpful to have a couple of more specific details around that, unless, I don't know, Jay, if you...
I think I understand where Keith is coming from. He's correct. The built-in admin account is pretty much disabled by default on all devices. I think this is standard. I don't think this is something that Autopilot or MDM Intune is doing to the device. It just starts out that way. And the problem, of course, is that, okay, how do you get it enabled? Well, one prerequisite for getting enabled is it has to have a password. And I'm not aware of any good tool in the Microsoft suite right now for pushing a password down to a managed device, because for obvious security reasons. So the only step for a brand new OS install, I'd recommend setting a really random password, enabling the account so that it's ready to go out of the box. For existing devices, you should target the account with a Windows Labs policy. We can actually set and maintain and rotate the password on a regular basis, even on a disabled account. Once Windows Labs has done that even once, you can then use the other tools that exist to change the enabled status of the account. So there's a little bit of a stutter step where you want to enable it right away, but you can't until a password is set. So do it in 2 stages. Enable Windows Labs, target the account, get a password set, and then fall back to the older policies to enable the account. We acknowledge this is non-ideal. I personally want to do a lot better, and we're thinking about that, but that's the current state of affairs.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Our next question comes from Phil. While it looks like Laps will work on Server 2019, servers cannot be managed from endpoint at this stage. So if you want to include servers, does that mean the save location needs to be AD? Or is that only applying to endpoint managed devices and they can be saved in either, while servers will have to be managed by GPO and saved in AD?
I'll take it briefly. I'll give a brief answer and let Laura follow up. I'm not the expert on which Microsoft Windows Server editions can be managed via Intune or MDM. I think that story has been a little bit of, a work in progress. Obviously, most of the attention is on the Windows client SKUs. That said, for the Windows Labs feature, all of the code is there ready to go. And so if you can get a Windows Server SKU, either 2022 or 2019, to be Azure AD joined, and if you can then somehow get the right Windows Labs policy to the device, whether it's via Intune or whether it's via on-premise GPO or whether it's via the manual application of the settings, the code will work, the scenario is supported. But that said, I think if you're going to be using Windows Labs with an Azure AD joined device, you really want to manage it via Intune. So I'm hoping Laura, sorry, Laura. I'm hoping Laura can expand a little bit on the support statement when it comes to endpoint management of Windows Server SKUs.
Yeah, I know server management is a big topic of discussion with Intune specifically. I will say that there is some conversation happening internally to figure out our story there, and that would expand obviously to lapse management, because I know that a lot of customers have been asking about this specifically. So currently we don't have the capability to deploy the lapse policy through the regular like MDM channels for servers, unfortunately. What I will say is that there is, again, conversation and discussion on it. So you might hear more around Intune plans to support that channel at some point. So I'll drop some breadcrumbs there. But also related to server management, not specifically for Laps, but for other security policies, we do have the MDE attach configuration support channel, which allows you to deploy policies like antivirus and firewall for your server endpoints through that channel. So it doesn't expand to Laps at this moment, but we are inching towards different ways to be able to deploy policy to Windows servers. So short answer, no. There might be more to come on that. But yeah, that's a great point to bring up.
Well, Laura, as those breadcrumbs you teased out a moment ago come to fruition, I'll be there to help you drive those comms. So thank you for your response.
Absolutely.
All right, our next question comes from Zayed. Since creating a new admin account is what was recommended, what's a clean way to create admin account via Intune? To add more context, our environment is Azure AD joined and machines are built with only a standard user account with built-in admin account disabled. I would like to bring Laps so that there's a local admin account on these machines.
I think there's already an existing setting in the Intune catalog. Isn't that correct, Laura? For creating and managing local accounts?
Yeah, there's a local user group management template within endpoint security, and there might be a couple of other settings related to the user account specifically.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you both. Our next question comes from Sigurd. Going back to what was said a few moments ago, so did I get that right? Windows Labs will rotate passwords on disabled local administrator accounts. I see Jay smiling at that one.
Yes. So I know that sounds odd, and from an initial standpoint, you might think, what the heck? That's silly. So first of all, if we do detect if the account is disabled, and we will log a warning event, But if you intend it to be this way, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with setting and rotating passwords on disabled accounts. Now, the reason we did this is because it was allowed in the Legacy Labs product. And one of the benefits of talking to customers is that I've since learned that some customers actually run with their Labs accounts disabled all of the time. And as part of their help desk workflow procedure, when they need to access and use the account, they'll actually move the target device into a different, in the on-prem world, a different OU that causes the account to be enabled. And then when the workflow is over, they'll move it back to the original OU. So if you are an extremely security conscious customer and you want to make sure that these accounts never represent any attack surface, this is a possible option. Now, that's sort of one of the promises of Labs is that, okay, we're generating these nice, long, super random passwords, so they're going to be immune almost anyway to attack or password spray. But, these are all tools in the toolbox. So I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Security's front and center for Windows 11, certainly. So I love hearing this. We've written extensively about it in a number of blog posts. So thank you for your response. Question from Brian. Do we need to keep Legacy Labs GPO policies on Legacy Labs client-side extension or CSE software installed all OSs that are pre-Windows 2019?
Since the Windows Labs feature isn't available pre-2019, yes, I would recommend that you continue to use and deploy Legacy Labs on those older platforms. Obviously, please look at upgrading as soon as you can for the benefits we've talked about before.
Oh, thank you. Our next one's an opinion question, so I'm definitely going to ask for both opinions, and I'll ask that you arrive at your opinions and lock in your votes before we actually give your responses. But it comes from Russell. What is your opinion on renaming the built-in admin account? And I'll start with Laura on that one.
I don't know if I'm
Switzerland?
like a joke answer, to be honest, but I don't think that's very good Microsoft guidance.
This is live online. You're open to do so.
Jay, do you have specific thoughts from like a security perspective?
I'm a big believer in defense in depth. So every little layer of defense in depth that you can add is worth it. And renaming the built-in admin account does constitute an additional layer of defense. So I would just do it. Now, that said, don't pretend to yourself that this is going to solve all possible attack vectors. But it makes sense, right? One of the things we've looked at, and just to throw a breadcrumb or an idea out there, is what would happen? What would it look like if we were to like randomize the account name on every device? Just to give you an idea of something we might look at in the future. That's a much more significant increase in defense in depth. But it's so cheap to rename the built-in admin account across all devices. I would just do it.
Okay.
Oh, I have to plug the new Windows Labs. So in the old Legacy Labs, the account name was not stored in the directory next to the password. So you had to either know in advance, a priori, or guess what the local admin account was. But now they come as a match pair. So there's really no chance for confusion. So it just removes another reason why you can't rename that account.
Thank you, Jay. I did see there was an aka.ms/labs feedback. I think it's what the aka link was. We'll pop it back in there, but there it is. Thank you. I have taken a look at that this morning because I know you surfaced that back some time ago, and it's gotten a good reception thus far on the feedback board, including passphrase support, which has got the highest number of upvotes at 13. Followed by dedicated password retrieval UI at 9 votes, ability to create local user within Labs policy at 7 upvotes, and prohibiting certain characters at 4 upvotes. Any thoughts on the feedback that you've received thus far since you posted the feedback page?
Oh, I'm loving it. I'm excited. I get a chance to get these ideas surfaced. Please do use that feedback link and let us know what you're looking for and upvote other people's ideas. It's a big way for us to get that feedback. On the specific ask around passphrase support, that's a big work item. Lots of design issues there, and things. I think we'll probably be working on the no confusing adjacent character one a little bit sooner, but we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, and to add to that, if there's feedback on what you wanted to see on the Intune or Azure portals from the management perspective, that we are always all ears as well. I know a couple of things that we had discussed internally was looking at additional reports that we can surface related to what devices in my environment have laps configured or not configured, a couple of different troubleshooting views, as well as just organizational high-level views for the tenant. So a lot of the things that you would like to see there, feel free to use our channels for that, because we're always looking at different ways and where customers want to see us expand support for. So keep it coming.
This is what I love about Microsoft. We really are ingesting all of that feedback. So hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge to all of you. Please take advantage of the feedback channels that we've posted up, as I know they're actively read and we take advantage of that. So our next question, how can one tell or detect that Windows Labs is running with disabled legacy Microsoft Labs emulation mode on a given Windows system, albeit server or client, only by checking the above mentioned registry key?
You can check the registry key if you want. However, the fact that we're in that mode, it's not called that mode, but it's in the event log. So every time we wake up, the Windows Labs client and Windows Now wakes up, it will log the effective policy that it's operating under. And you will see when you set the so-called disable legacy labs emulation mode, you'll see a policy configuration dump message that details that it has been disabled. So that's probably the better way and a little bit more accessible.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Our next question comes from Andrew. In order to use the full functionality of Windows Labs, do we have to update our ADDCs to Windows Server 2019? If we do not update our DCs to 2019, can we still update our regular workstations to Windows 11 and use the legacy Labs until we update the DCs?
You can absolutely still use Windows Labs without updating all your DCs to 2019. This is a confusing topic. Hopefully one of my colleagues on the chat will post a link to the DFL and domain controller OS version table that I have in our documentation. The way this works is that your domain join clients can use Windows Labs just fine, regardless of the version of the domain controllers. That said, you're going to want to be at least at 2016 domain functional level so that you can enable password encryption. So if you're not already on 2016 domain functional level, I really recommend that you just get there as soon as possible for that feature alone. Now, if you still are running, I know, and that's true even if you have all 2016 domain controllers, and that's okay. The clients will not care. Now, we also have a new DSRM password backup support in Windows Labs. Each individual DC can act upon that, but only if it's server 2019 and above. So these are two different things. What the functionality that's needed by the clients, which is really just 2016 DFL and above for password encryption. And then if you want to use the DSRM feature, you need 2019 DCs individually. You don't have to have them all be 2019, but for that feature. So that was a little confusing. It's all spelled out in the docs. Send me an email if it did make sense.
I think we'll go ahead and make sure we include that, as well as the skilling snack, the Labs feedback board, and your getting started guide in the tech community chat. I'm sorry, Jay, did I cut you off there?
No, I'm trying to think if I missed the second part of his question. You see here, you can still use legacy Labs regardless of the version of your domain controllers. So next question.
Awesome. I think our next question comes from Twitter. We're going to start the process of upgrading our AD from 2012 R2 to Windows Server 2022 with DFL 2016. Do I need to have any consideration about legacy Labs, or can I start a deployment as if I had never implemented it before? What are the minimum OS requirements for domain integrated computers and servers to work with the new AD deployment in 2022? Did I stump the team?
No, I'm thinking. So the only thing that might stop you from getting to Server 2022 or Server 2022 with DFL 2016, you're going to want to look at migrating away from NTFSR. If you have not already done that, that's not lab specific, but you should certainly do that anyway. If you've never implemented legacy labs, well, congratulations. I'm glad you're here. You don't need to implement it. You don't need to care about legacy labs. Just jump immediately over to using Windows labs and you'll be just fine. In terms of minimum OS requirements, this is spelled out in the supported platforms list on the overview section of the Windows Labs docs. Windows 10 minimum client, plus both flavors of Windows 11, and then also Server 2022 and Server 2019 SKUs can also act as domain joined servers and use Windows Labs to its fullest.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Our next one is a piece of feedback from Jeff. I've spent the entire day trying to manage Windows Labs from a workstation. RSAT tools for Labs are not easily enabled. Command documented is invalid, and it's frustrating. How is this going to be improved? Boy, here's a good one for transparency for us, right?
Correct. So I feel bad that the only UI available for the on-premise lab scenario is the Active Directory users and computers snap-in, but that's where we're at currently. I'm not aware of any invalid command, so send me email jsimmons@microsoft.com and I'll respond. But I thought I had this nailed. You can use the inbox RSAT on Windows 10, Windows 11, in both flavors of Windows 11 to manage Windows Labs. There have been some customers who reported that they had older external versions, the out-of-box package versions of RSAT installed on platforms that was taking precedence over the inbox version, and therefore they weren't seeing the new property page tab. So if you have a bug with the commands or the docs, let me know. But it should be just install the RSAT package via settings, optional features, and away you go. So if that's not the case, we'll get it fixed in the docs.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Again, I encourage everyone to enter any questions, comments, observations at aka.ms/ama/Windows Labs. Again, I think most people are aware certainly of your blog and of the skilling snacks that we post that aggregates a number of different items that you have with respect to labs. I have a comment here from Rudy that I wanted to share. Just wanted to drop by to see and hear from Jay talking about labs, as he already answered my weird questions earlier on. So please say hi to me, to Jay, from me to Jay. That comes from Rudy. It's really nice to see. I think Rudy's one of you actively participate with Rudy on some of his questions.
I got connected with Rudy through another MVP that I was talking to, and Rudy was asking a lot of very detailed, low-level questions about the design of the Windows Labs client code. So that was an interesting experience. He's a very savvy guy who was able to quickly know what I had done. So yes.
Yeah, there's tons of, I would just mention like the different forums that we have for documentation. I think this feature is one of the most heavily documented that I've worked on. So very thankful to the team and Jay specifically for going into the depths. I think a lot of the questions that folks have on how the client controls work, and then also prerequisites and a bunch of the different edge cases, you can definitely see a lot of documentation and information for that. And one thing that I'll mention, because I think a couple of customers had run into this, one of the prerequisites to use Labs with Intune specifically is to enable a global tenant setting on the Azure AD side. This has been called out in a lot of our prerequisite documentation, but just as a reminder to folks, I think that was missed a couple of times when customers were first getting started. But yeah, it should be there spelled out in a lot of the forums that we have for this.
I love how it popped up with Yay documentation. As you know, I'm a huge advocate for comms and documentation. Thank you, Laura. Our next question comes from Brian. Can we use Windows Labs GPO policies to configure the pre-Windows 2019 operating systems, provided we keep the CSE software installed on those machines?
You cannot. The new inbox Windows Labs policies do not know how to set the legacy Labs policy settings. So the way to think about this is that we have runtime support for legacy Labs policy emulation at the runtime level, but we are not planning to do to provide long-term support for the administration of the legacy Labs feature. So the whole point of the legacy Labs emulation mode is simply a short-term thing to help customers ease through a migration scenario, because in a very large environment, you're not going to just flip a switch, and you might want to go step by step. So that's the way to think about legacy Labs emulation mode. It's not considered to be something that's going to be super long term. And in the interim, when you're still in the migration phase, you do still need to use the legacy Labs policy tools and the template, etc., to administer that part of the feature.
Great. Thank you, Jay. We're about to wrap up here, and I wanted to see if you guys had any last thoughts on where we're headed with Labs, what customers can expect to see, and some of the work that you're doing. I'll start with Laura. Laura?
Yeah, for sure. I think some of the things that we'd mentioned earlier in this conversation are top of mind for us to see how we can expand coverage and a different controls based on customer feedback. So that is super, super important to the areas that we prioritize and dive into. So I'll just hammer home again, keep sending the feedback. The things that you guys want to see is what we're listening and reading into. From the Intune perspective, I think I'd mentioned before some additional reporting capabilities. Any other ways to make management easier as well are just top of mind areas. So again, keep giving us the feedback, and we are definitely looking at that and using that to plan our roadmap.
Awesome. Jay?
I can't beat what Laura just said. Feedback is just I'm 100% feedback driven at this point. If the folks that have been watching me comment on the blogs and other places, I'm really listening to every bit of feedback. Specifically, things that I think we might be looking at here is easing the administration burden of the target local account. A lot of customers have complained or commented that is not a nice, seamless, easy experience. Post authentication actions, I was a little surprised that a lot of customers use in their help desk procedures, they use an over-the-shoulder elevation procedure where they're like doing a run as of a specific app as opposed to an interactive logon. And so many customers have asked, well, hey, why can't you terminate those individual processes as well? Let's see what else. And the password phrase and/or ease you to read passwords. So those are a few of the things that I think might surface hopefully in more sooner rather than later.
The takeaway I'm getting is keep the cards and letters coming, because you guys are acutely interested in the feedback and bringing it into the product.
Yes.
Be nice, but give us feedback.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, Laura and Jay, I really am grateful for your time today, as I am with having the customer questions come in. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Be sure to check out the Windows Tech community. Check out the feedback spots that both Laura and Jay mentioned to bring your feedback to them to implement within Labs. But I want to thank everybody for their time this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, again, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for your time today, everybody, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
See you, everybody.